Hi, we've made it to the last chapter of the class. It's about managing communication. And so we start off with what is communication? Well, basically, it's an understanding of a message that is from the sender to the receiver. And you see this graphic here, and there's a lot of stuff going on with this graphic, and I'm gonna try to make it a little more simplistic. So when we have the sender, they're trying to get this message, and so what's happening to you as you're receiving a message, we're looking at the channel, whether it be email, this video that we're doing, or a face-to-face conversation. And through that process, you're taking it and you're decoding, what does this message mean? And then from the receiver, you're giving feedback to the sender. Now, this receiver feedback could be anything from a question, a facial expression, it could be body language. There's lots of different ways that we can give feedback to the sender to see that their message is being received. Now, this idea of decoding, what this is that we're taking the message and we're kind of like translating into our speak. So what I mean by that is when I hear like a discussion, a question, I will take that question and regurgitate it back to the person to make sure I understand it, just so I understand what the point is. And that feedback that we give now, the feedback, it can be in form of teaching to students, a quiz. It could be from a leader slash manager to a subordinate to see if they understand the process. One of the things you can do is you give a message to someone and you say, okay, now tell me this, how did you understand what I said? And I know that seems like micromanaging, it might be insulting, but it might be important sometimes, especially if you don't get a second chance, the second chance to do the project over. So you ask them, okay, what do you understand? Can you repeat back to me? And again, like I said, it's kind of micromanaging, but sometimes it might be necessary. Now, I've mentioned to you throughout the whole class that you're going to be judged more on the spoken word than the written word. And I stand by that. Now, there are some instances where the written communication does have to happen. Termination of an employee, promotion of an employee, job offer, that absolutely, and there has to be some sort of legal documents, 100%. Where I'm going with this is that if you are if you're trying to sell something, so rather than give just a packet and talk to a person, say, here, look at this packet over, let me know. Talk to them. If you're doing marketing and you're selling a product to a whole bunch of people, you're talking about your product, they're going to pay attention to what you have to say. In a classroom environment, if I say, okay, read the book, read the chapter, and let me know if you have any questions. Chances are not a lot of you are going to read the book, and even if you may not have questions, but if I talk and tell you about what is in that chapter and tell you some of the important things and ask you to give me some of your feedback, and then I can also take a look and see if there's like, if your facial expressions, if you are, in space somewhere, if you're on your phone, or if you're actually paying attention, I can take a look at this and I understand quickly that my message to you is being received. So that verbal communication is so, so important. Now, in regards to written communication, as you can see, our drawback, it can be time consuming 100%. Because you write, rewrite. The same holds true in a verbal communication because you could do a speech, you can rewrite the speech. Don't memorize the speech, okay? And I'll talk about that later. So you don't want to do that. But there are some drawbacks, but like I said, practice on the verbal communication. So the nonverbal cue is not what you say, it's how you say it. I've talked to you before about, if I deliver this class discussion, I'm just like, here we go again. You're not going to be entertained with it. You're not going to be following it. So it's how you say it. Be enthusiastic. Not to say they have to jump up and down for joy for what you're talking about, but show that you're interested in what you're talking about, because if you're not interested, your audience is going to be interested. You can't expect them to be interested, and it's not fair to them to expect them to be interested. So it could be hand gestures, it could be smiles. There's so many other things that you can do. All right. So our first keyword is going to be a communication barrier. And so we have filters. So what I mean by these filters is that, let's say that it's a political season and you're for candidate A, and an ad for candidate B comes on. It can be your Spotify, it can be your radio, TV, whatever the case may be. And you're a fan of candidate A, so you're going to tune out candidate B. But if candidate A comes on, you're like, yeah, right, I'm for that person. So that's kind of a filter that we have. Um, so then, of course, there's could be emotions involved. Um, if you're really angry about something that's going on, and something triggers you and you get even more angrier, yes. Um, you also can talk when you're really mad. I don't advise that, and that's verbal and written. One of the worst things you can do is you get really mad and just pound, 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 pound on the keyboard and send an email out, send this vicious email. That's going to come back to haunt you. What I recommend is that do not ever type something in an email when you're really mad. Go into like Word or Google Docs or somewhere and type it there, because Murphy's Law being what it is that you'll type this email and instead of hitting delete, you'll hit send. And it goes out to everyone or whoever you sent it to. And so just be careful, because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble with that. So watch your emotions, pay attention to, even though maybe someone you don't support, like candidate B, but be open to communication. All right, so our second keyword is going to be feedback. Now, in regard to feedback, this is again what we talked about earlier: is how do we give and how do we know our message being received? So we do it with the feedback. Again, in the audience, how they're looking, what they're doing, are there questions, are there enthusiasm, or just interest? Okay, so that's one of the things that you can do. Take surveys afterwards. You can do that. I told you before. Well, I think I've told you this before, but at the end of every class that I do, I ask them, "How's it going? How'd it go today?" And if I get, about 75 to 85%, yeah, it went well, good. If I get like 20% it went good, I know I did something wrong, and so I got to improve that for the next time. So ask for that feedback. All right. So in regards to contemporary issues and in communication, communicating with customers, um, when you do this, be yourself above anything else. If you're in a position, if you're in sales, if you're representing the company at a store or anything and the like, they're looking to you. You're the face, and so you want to be one that's very open and receptive to people. Now, I understand people can be rude. I get it. You got to keep your composure. Um, I've dealt with rude people before, and you just let them go. And sometimes I snap back at them. That kind of surprises them, but I will snap back at them. Um, get an employee input. Ask them what the communication is like. If they're satisfied with the communication, one of the things that I've talked about this a couple times during the course is that the number one issue that I've heard with employees is that communication in the workplace is the number one issue. They feel like there has been enough communication for them to know what's going on in the workplace. So that's some of the things that ask them, and of course communicate ethically. I think you have a pretty good idea what that is. Just don't offend anyone. Just be straight with your communication, and you'll be fine. So in personal interaction, this has changed dramatically over the course of time with employees. And let me explain. So in regards to when I was in US News or when I was at the newspaper, social media wasn't around. And so we talked to each other, and email was just starting when I was at the newspaper. And that was in the mid 90s, when we started communicating by email. And so we phoned or we did, conversations, but mainly by phone. And so, yeah, we had conversations, and yeah, we were close, but we didn't have the constant interaction or access to each other. So that leads us to our third final keyword of the course. It's going to be social media. And you can see here that 77% say they use social media to connect with colleagues. True. I mean, that's very true. I do it with fellow faculty members, and I think most people do that with their coworkers. I know my daughter, where she works, she's heavily involved in social media and connecting back and forth. But again, back in the days when I was at the newspaper magazine, we didn't have that. And 61% say social media has led to newer, better work relationships. Yeah, because you're in contact and you get to find ways to know people. So you can take a look at their feeds and see what pictures they post, where before you didn't have that. You may have some pictures in an office area, but now you get more of a personal idea about who they are. And now you can build a better relationship because now you see, hey, we got more in common than we thought. So we've reached the last slide of the class, and it's customer service. And we talked briefly about this, about talking with customers. And when I worked at Panera, my job was to take the orders and hopefully keep people happy. Now, one thing about taking orders, whether it is in a industrial area, a service area, is that always make sure to repeat the orders, because what happens is that mistakes can occur and it's going to cost the organization some money. Now, if it's at a restaurant, yeah, it's maybe a new salad, new sandwich. But if it's industrial and commercial, it could cost thousands of dollars. So always repeat the order back. And when I was at Quebecor, we always had a second set of eyes that would take a look at our job tickets to make sure everything was accurate. And we also did the same thing at US News in terms of our layouts for binderies, which was stitching the book together. And so we always had a second set of eyes. But I know I'm getting off track a little bit. But in regards to customer service, repeat the order. Understand that people may or may not know what they want, so you may have to guide them along, and that's okay. It requires a lot of patience, and it requires good, solid communication. Just listening to them. And remember how I told you in earlier chapters, when you listen to a person, when we're talking about empathy, you listen to the person and then you hear what they say and then just wait just a little bit, like 3 seconds or so, and then make a comment back, because that silence shows that you care, you're processing, and it also shows a little bit of reflection that you're thinking about what they're saying. And in addition, what it'll show is that what happens is it gives you just a little bit of time to formulate an answer. Well, that's it for chapter 14, and that's it for the class in terms of discussions. I hope you enjoyed these discussions, and I look forward to your feedback, and if there's anything I can do to improve them. I hope that you enjoyed this discussion, and as I've said in the other 13 chapters, is there anything I can do, please let me know. I'm here for you, and take care of yourself and have an amazing day. Bye.